There are a lot, and I do mean a lot, of characters that are misunderstood in Genshin. But today, we are going to talk about Xiao. Rude, edgy, short, hates humans, all of which are things most of the Genshin Impact fandom will associate with Xiao. So I'm here to tell you in explicit detail why Xiao is none of those things. Misconception number 1. He's rude. So to give a bit of context, because I'm a weeb, I play mostly in Japanese and occasionally in Chinese. So imagine my surprise when I heard people say that Xiao is rude. Like, what do you mean he's rude? Are we talking about the same character? And then I switched to English and heard his voice lines for the first time.
Boring! Useless!
I was genuinely surprised to find that he sounds very aggressive in the English dub for absolutely no reason and to absolutely everyone. And a huge reason for the misconception around Xiao, like at least 99% of it, is the direction of the English voice acting. Now, this isn't the VA's fault, like at all, but the English dub of Xiao does sound like he's just pissed off for no reason. And this is only in English. In every other dub except English, Xiao is actually portrayed as calm and polite. In the Chinese dub, which is the dub that I will be taking as canon, Xiao is harsh and cold and aloof, yes, but he never once raises his voice or even comes off as annoyed or unpleasant. Even in the lines for his elemental skills, he says Wu Liao, which means boring in Chinese, which indicates that he's bored because of the dull fight, which is very different from him aggressively screaming worthless at the enemies like he does in English. But other than the strange decisions made for his English dub, another reason why a large chunk of the community thinks he's rude is mostly because Xiao has no social skills. Xiao is someone who lives in isolation. He actively avoids humans because he views himself as a threat and a danger, and his mere presence and karmic debt will bring harm to everyone near him. His lack of social skills and therefore his tendencies to be blunt and straightforward often comes across as rude and intimidating, and it gives a lot of people around him the impression that he's unapproachable. The best example of this is probably Ganyu. She's probably one of the few people who has known Xiao for a really long time, and even she hesitates to come close to him, even though she knows that Xiao isn't a bad person. He also sounds a lot younger in English, so I guess that also adds to the rude, angry, edgy teen misconception that most of the English-speaking players have about Xiao. In Chinese and Japanese, he does sound tired and jaded, and he does have a deeper, more mature voice too.
我居然沦落到如此闲散的地步。
So it's not at all a voice that you would associate with a teenager, and his tone is a lot softer as well. So it's really jarring and bizarre that the English localization team decided to go with the Sasuke edgelord route when trying to portray Xiao. Which brings me to the next misconception that people often have about Xiao, and that he's edgy. If we go by the Urban Dictionary definition of edgy, then Xiao is definitely not that. I will be going into a bit of Xiao's lore, so spoilers if you don't know anything about him. But Xiao, even in his overly edgy English incarnation, isn't trying to be the I'm too cool to be nice stereotype that everyone expects him to be, nor is he the edgelord who is unhappy all the time and can't wait to end it all. He's just a lot more complex than that. And I think it's such a disservice to his writing to reduce him to another edgelord stereotype. In case you need a refresher on Xiao's backstory, before Zhongli found him, he was held hostage by a cruel god. He was forced to commit atrocities and harm innocent people against his will. Xiao was literally a slave. He was brutally abused and tortured by this god. And this is without a doubt the start of Xiao's PTSD and lack of self-worth. It was from this point onwards that he started seeing himself only as a weapon, as a tool for slaughter and nothing more. But that all changed in the Archon War, where Zhongli killed the cruel god and in turn setting Xiao free. This is the reason why Xiao is so loyal to Zhongli, and as a way to repay him, Xiao signs a contract with him. This contract is not only Xiao's way to repay Zhongli, but it is also a way for him to essentially atone for his sins. But even if Xiao is technically free, he isn't free from his past trauma. Hence why, even when surrounded by people who do truly care for his well-being, Xiao isn't really able to see past his past and is still very much convinced that he's only good as Liyue's weapon. And with his newly assigned role as one of Liyue's yakshas, Xiao is forced to deal with the remains of the old gods, and in turn causes him to suffer from karmic debt. Later down the line, Xiao is forced to witness the other yakshas succumb to darkness, go mad, and die horrible deaths one by one until he was the only one left at the end. And keep in mind that Xiao was close to the other yakshas to the point that they had a found family kind of dynamic between them, with Busacious acting as their leader. So with them dying and him being the only one left, let's add survivor's guilt onto the already very long list of trauma that Xiao has. His overwhelming sense of guilt is also the reason why he has so little regard for his own life and why he always puts others before himself, because in his eyes, his life has no value, and if the situation calls for it, he should be the one to sacrifice himself in order to save others. This is exactly what we saw during the second act of the interlude quest in the chasm. Xiao constantly shows disregard for his own life. He insists that the traveler should stop looking for him because he thinks it might be too dangerous, even when he's severely injured. And later on, when trapped in the chasm, Xiao is quick to offer a plan that ultimately ends with him sacrificing himself so that the others could escape. And unsurprisingly, no one agrees to this. Yelan even calls him out for it, saying that his plan makes no sense considering that his self-sacrifice doesn't even guarantee that the others would make it out safely. Yelan is probably one of the only characters who sees right through Xiao. She knew almost instantly that Xiao didn't actually want to die. She understood that his insistence on the plan was because he valued his life much less than the lives of everyone there. If his true intentions were so that he could finally end it all and be at peace, then he simply wouldn't have given the others a chance to share their opinion. She even gets annoyed that Xiao is seemingly unable to understand that there is in fact a way to get out of the chasm without leaving him behind. But we as the player should understand that given Xiao's past, it's natural that he only prepares for the worst case scenario. And because he's lived in isolation for most of his life, he's used to shouldering everything on his own. The last thing he wants is to be a burden to someone else, someone whose life is much more precious than his. So it's really understandable that the first thing that comes to Xiao's mind is to sacrifice himself, because hey, in his eyes, he's nothing more than a weapon whose existence has only brought destruction and pain. So if anyone should die, it should be him. So him wanting to die isn't an edge, nor is it even a trope. It's honestly just a big part of his writing. Hell, he doesn't even actually want to die. He just thinks he needs to die a heroic death as a yaksha because that's the only thing he's good for. That's why he's so insistent on self-sacrifice. We literally should never take whatever comes out of Xiao's mouth at face value. I think Xiao, more than any other character, is someone who doesn't understand his own emotions. He says he needs to die, but he clearly wants to live. This voice line is a lie if you ask me. He says in this line that he has no desires, but this again is just him not being able to process or even comprehend his own emotions, because in his character card it stated that he does have desires. He desires to put on his mask but not to fight, but to dance to the sound of the flute that saved him. So clearly Xiao feels feels desires, he feels human emotions, but he's just convincing himself that he can't feel those things. But having to repress his emotions for so long has left him in a state that he's unable to process anything and let alone admit to them. So he's just convinced that he doesn't have any desires because he's a weapon, which is pretty f***ed up. Misconception 3. He's short. You're wrong. There's no proof of this. Let's move on. Misconception number 4. He hates humans. This is probably the one I find most annoying. I mean, I find all of the misconceptions annoying, but this one, my god. I guess I can understand why some people think Xiao hates humans, but he doesn't. Xiao is described as someone who holds no hatred nor grudges towards anything, even towards the things that he's forced to kill. As we have previously established, Xiao is someone who lives in isolation because he has no self-worth and because he thinks that he will only bring harm to the people around him. And while his karmic debt is actually something that could harm humans as far as I know, I also think that Xiao uses his karmic debt as an excuse to continue living in isolation. His issues have much deeper roots than just him staying away to keep everyone safe. Like, don't get me wrong, I do think a big part of why Xiao chooses to live in solitude is because he doesn't want anyone to get hurt, but I also think it's just because he thinks he has no place in the human world. So Xiao already thinks of himself as a weapon, right? So it's pretty natural for him to think that a weapon that's made for killing should stay as far away as possible from human civilization so that he can avoid killing innocent people when fighting from just collateral damage. He even says in his teapot voice lines that he doesn't want any bystanders during a fight because he doesn't think he can control himself nor his power, and this can potentially hurt a lot of innocent people. And if Xiao truly hated humans, then he simply wouldn't have cared if he killed one or two while doing his job. But just in case you're unconvinced, I'll give you another example of Xiao not hating humans. If you talk to little Luo, she will tell you that a handsome and dashing adeptus gave her back her doll that was stolen by hilichurls. And another fun example of Xiao not hating humans is that Xiao himself tells you that he asked the owner of Wangshu Inn to take in Dusky Ming because she couldn't cross over despite being a harmless spirit, and he felt sorry for her. So it's pretty clear that Xiao doesn't hate humans in the slightest. In fact, just by looking at his actions, he's shown to be very gentle and caring towards the humans he comes across. Like, he's legit one of the gentlest deities in Liyue that we meet. He even gives Hu Tao, who is notorious for being annoying for her pranks and shenanigans the time of day, to the point that it's implied that they're familiar with each other, and he even thinks that she's funny and interesting. He also has voice lines about Beidou and Yelan, commending them for their abilities. Clearly, Xiao keeps tabs on what's happening in the human world. He also told Chongyun that he should f off because he's weak and he should leave all of the demon slaying to Xiao. But knowing Xiao, he probably said this because he truly believes that the burden of vanquishing demons in Liyue should fall on him and him alone. This is largely my opinion, but I think he convinced himself that he can't afford to care about any of the humans because he thinks he doesn't deserve to. He's not a part of the human society, so why should he? And this brings me to my last misconception about Xiao, and that being his character arc is about his desire to die and nothing else. AKA, he's emo and sad and depressed, and that's it. Now, again, this is mostly just my opinion, but after researching for this video, I realized that while most of Xiao's lore is mainly about how he struggles with PTSD and his trauma, his overall character arc is more about self-acceptance and having the desire to live despite his horrible past. If we solely focus on Xiao's actions, that being him ready to sacrifice himself at any given point, then you would think that his arc would be about how he would finally be at peace and free of his karmic debt when he dies a heroic death to save Liyue. But with the release of 2.4's interlude quest, I think it's made clearer than ever that his arc is about him learning how to live. Not just surviving, but allowing himself to experience life, to have desires, to have companionship, and to rely on others despite him always wanting to shoulder everything on his own. It's also why he's such a big part of the Lantern Rite every year, and probably why his banner title is literally Invitation to Mundane Life. Each year we get a story about how people around Xiao continue to accept him for who he is, despite everything that's happened in his past. Other characters, even those who are essentially strangers to Xiao, like Ito and Shinobu, can see the value in his life and refuse to leave him behind despite his insistence in doing so. Zhongli, his god, his savior, someone who Xiao feels most indebted to, clearly cares about him as he silently watches over Xiao and quite literally saves him again in the interlude quest, despite Xiao feeling guilty that Zhongli needed to step in and save him. At the end of the day, Zhongli still decided that Xiao's life was worth saving, and in turn showing Xiao that he could rely on him and others for support, which, as the Traveler would put it, has always been how humans survive throughout the ages. And the mere concept of relying on others is obviously something that Xiao has yet to understand, given his reluctance to share any of his burdens with others. Even Venti, a foreign god, seems to care enough about Xiao to save him just before he succumbs to darkness. Now, whether or not this was intentional, we don't know yet, but the new trailer suggests that Xiao and Venti know each other, and knowing Venti, it's highly likely that it wasn't a coincidence that he was playing the Dihua flute in Liyue at that exact moment. I mean, come on. So just going off of this, everyone other than Xiao himself seemed to be able to see the value and worth in his life, and this slowly causes Xiao to accept that he does have a twisted sense of self-worth, and that he does always think in the worst case scenario. It's only after the multiple Lantern Rite quest and the Chasm interlude quest that Xiao slowly opens up to the Traveler and other humans such as Yanfei and Yulan. And even after everything, Xiao still has a very long way to go, as pointed out by Yulan, who is unsurprisingly frustrated that Xiao tried to sacrifice himself again. Xiao's way of thinking is something that is deeply rooted in him. It's something that he has believed in for literally 2 millennia. But it seems like with every year and every Lantern Rite we experience in Genshin, Xiao is not only learning to be more open with the people around him, but to forgive himself, and finally allowing himself to live as someone who is more than just a weapon. Let me know what you think about Xiao and his story so far. Personally, I love him, and considering how it's almost Lantern Rite, I'm using this video as an excuse to talk more about Xiao and also to draw more of him. Subscribe and like if you want. If not, that's fine. Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!